everyone, dear students, professors, and guests. My name is Yerevan Physics, and I am MIT Armenian Society President. I have the honor to welcome you all today from the name of MIT Armenian Society for a discussion about science, technology, and education in Armenia. MIT is a world-known facility where engineers and thinkers work hard to build the world in which we all are going to be living tomorrow. MIT Armenians play an important role in synthesizing the knowledge and synergizing it with the tradition of Shiragatsi, Orbeli, Mikoyan and Hambartsumian, and others in order to expand the limits of Armenian innovation and transform them into reachable horizons. MIT Armenian Society acknowledges the social, political, economical, and technological challenges that the world, and of course Armenia and the diaspora in particular, are facing today. And we want to take the most proactive role to facilitate the development of the Armenian world and provide the solutions for all the aforementioned problems for them. We're incredibly happy, therefore, to welcome you this evening at MIT campus to meet one of the stars and hopes of Armenian science today, to discuss the issues that I listed before, to make connections, and to build on each other's knowledge. I'll pass the word to Mark Mamikonian to introduce our speaker to you. Please welcome Paran Mamikonian. He is the head of National Association Armenian Studies and Research, who along with Calouste Gulbenkian Foundation, the series of contemporary Armenian issues, is co-founding and co-organizing the event today.
Thanks, Sirosh. Good evening. First and foremost, I want to thank the MIT Armenian Society, and in particular Sironush, for collaborating with us as part of the NAASR Calouste Gulbenkian Foundation series on contemporary Armenian issues. I also want to thank Professor Arek Danagulian of MIT for his participation and cooperation in making this event possible, as well as the support of Professor Lerna Ekmekjolu, who are in the back of the room, for her cooperation and support as well. We will hear from Professor Danagulian later, as he will moderate the discussion following Professor Aprahamian's talk. Now, the vast majority of NAASR's contemporary programs have dealt with political, social, or historical matters. For example, this fall, we've had 3 programs entitled Armenia's Velvet Revolution after 6 months, held at Harvard, Columbia, and George Washington universities. And although, for example, we also held an event last December on environmental security in Armenia, we don't do much in the realm of the sciences per se, so tonight is a very welcome exception. So on to our speaker. Professor Ani Aprahamian was appointed as Director of the Alikhanyan National Science Laboratory, the Yerevan Physics Institute in Yerevan, in April 2018. She is the first woman and the first diasporan Armenian to hold this important position. Professor Aprahamian was born in Lebanon and is a descendant of Armenian Genocide survivors. She holds a bachelor's and a doctorate from Clark University in Worcester, where she was yesterday. She is the Freeman Professor of Experimental Nuclear Physics at the University of Notre Dame, where she has taught since 1989. Professor Aprahamian has given over 200 invited talks at various national and international conferences and has over 200 publications in refereed journals, book chapters, etc. 200 is the magic number. She is active in numerous international and national advisory committees in nuclear science, and among the many honors recognizing her achievements, she is an elected fellow of the Science Academy of the Republic of Armenia, the American Association for the Advancement of Science, and the American Physical Society. It perhaps goes without saying that this is only the most cursory presentation of Professor Aprahamian's long and impressive resume of accomplishments. In light of her amazing portfolio, I should say that I could hardly be more proud to be introducing her tonight to you, except that I'm just a little more proud to do so because Professor Aprahamian is also my cousin. So believe me when I say I really couldn't be more proud to present to you Professor Ani Aprahamian, Director of the Alikhanyan National Science Laboratory in Yerevan. Ani.
Thank you very much, Mark, and thank you all very much for coming out this evening. I know it's an auspicious evening, it's election, it's raining, so I really appreciate that you took the trouble to be here. But let me start off by saying that, as Mark said, I've become the new director of Alikhanyan National Laboratory of Armenia. What a big honor that is for me. And he mentioned that I'm the first woman, and I sort of didn't think about being a woman part of the whole thing. But I did think about being a diasporan Armenian to be appointed to this very important position in Armenia. I want to talk today about what's going on at what used to be the Yerevan Physics Institute. I welcome your advice and your comments afterwards, so please feel free to contact me and write to me. But I want to do it in the backdrop of my passion for science. Now, why passion for science? You might say a lot of people are curious about science. But for me personally, having been born in Beirut, Lebanon, science was kind of a refuge. It made me feel safe, but there were two reasons for that. My father was always a very avid newspaper reader, and through our entire childhood in Lebanon, every evening he would tell us the stories about how the scientists in Armenia had done this or that, about the Alikhanyan brothers, the Migoyan brothers, the Hampartsumian, Margarian, you know, all of these famous people. So we lived in our family in Beirut in this galaxy of famous Armenian scientists. And that was really a fantastic thing for me as a kid I loved science for that reason. So that really strengthened and pushed it forward. The other thing is that I was in a school that was had some American benefactors who had built us a school, and they had given us this amazing library. The science part I couldn't tear myself away from. There were so many resources that I had sort of made an imaginary laboratory in our humble apartment in Beirut that was my laboratory. So that's in the context of, lots of people ask me, how is it that an American nuclear physicist from a university goes to Armenia to try and do a job like this? I'll talk this evening with just basically 3 points. One is a little bit about the history of the laboratory. An amazing laboratory. Amazing history of accomplishments in the past. It used to be called the Yerevan Physics Institute and recognized worldwide. If you said it, people knew where the Yerevan Physics Institute was, what people did. And how it became the Alikhanyan National Laboratory. And basically how I got involved with the whole thing. What is my involvement with Yerevan Physics Institute in Alikhanyan? And then a bit about what I see to happen in the near future. As Mark mentioned, I just took the job in April, so this is November, and I'll tell you a little bit of what's happened. So this is sort of an artistic view of the main building at Alikhanyan National Laboratory. It's the main building that's occupied now. Alikhanyan has a huge property, and I'll show that on the map in a bit. But it was founded in 1943 by the brothers Alikhanyan. 1943, if we think back historically, were incredibly difficult times in Armenia. Right? Just after the war, people didn't have enough to eat, but they founded a science laboratory. And they made lots of very first discoveries in physics. So Yerevan Physics Institute became famous for that. It was the institute that brought internet to the region. So I'm mentioning all of these because we tend to now look at Armenia and say, well, they're not quite world class in the sciences, right? But I want to say that they were. 2-neutrino double beta decay was first observed in Yerevan at the Physics Institute. this 6 GeV electron accelerator. Does anyone know when the US made a 6 GeV electron accelerator? When?
2 years before that.
No, the US did it in the 90s. Jefferson Lab.
Harvard had a, MIT had a 6 GeV accelerator in those years.
But before Thomas Jefferson Lab in Virginia, Newport News,
When was
they
that?
had an electron accelerator, but they didn't have a 6 GeV one.
MIT built a 1 GeV accelerator in the late 70s, Bates, MIT Bates.
Yes, but the point is, this was 6 GeV, and the US just last year went to 12 GeV. So, okay. So just a few things about Soviet times and now. So Soviet times, this is word of mouth because I don't have the records myself. There were over 3,000 scientists working in this laboratory. Some people said there were periods where it was 4,500. I cannot prove that. Everyone, I've talked to several people that can verify the 3,000 number. I don't know about the 4,500. But today there's 350 people at this lab. And 160 of them are scientists. So the rest are engineers and support staff and so on. The 6 GeV electron accelerator is no longer working. It was a big energy drain in terms of electricity, and it was pretty much mothballed after Armenia became independent. There is an electron injector linear accelerator. So it's 50 MeV, it's 50 years old. It was upgraded to 70 MeV recently. And then there is a new 18 MeV cyclotron, which was just bought a couple of years ago. Not a couple, a few years ago. So before we start talking about what the challenges in the lab are, I'd like us to just say that there are good things happening in this place right now. And I show a few examples. So this was a patent received by somebody who works at the lab. He's a cosmology, astrophysics guy. Got a patent on the study of the human genome. Studies to the precise placement of satellites require some very small corrections to general relativity, and these guys have done that. And Armenia is a part of this big international collaboration where there's 30+ countries involved, thousands of scientists. This is looking at neutrino oscillations. The idea is to produce a beam at Fermilab in Illinois and send a beam of neutrinos all the way to an underground mine in South Dakota, which has been converted to a research facility. It's over 4,000 feet underground in a gold mine. Many people are familiar with the cosmic ray physics, and this is the physics that is still done in Armenia. So we will see, I'll mention some of the areas that research is done all over the world, Armenian scientists going there, but when you think about what science is done in Armenia, this is basically it. So the idea there is to look at lightning and thunderstorms and to look at secondary particles. Armenia is well known for that, the cosmic ray physics division. The head of the division is Ashot Chilingarian, who was the last director of Alikhanyan. Detectors for cosmic ray physics are placed all over Armenia. And actually this group constructs these detectors and sells them to different countries. So each detector is something like $8,000. They build it and send it overseas. So if we look at the world, these are all the countries in which these detectors exist. So these detectors were important for both studying space weather, solar storms, and also what happens sort of secondary particle fluxes after storms. So they're pretty well known for this and recognized as Armenians being a big role in this. So I wanted to start with the strengths because that's important. And that was the most important thing with my dealings with laboratory scientists in Armenia. The scientists of this lab, these are the publications in the last 5 years. If you look at, these are all the science publications in Armenia. Sorry, this top one is all the publications from Alikhanyan Laboratory in the last 5 years. So remember I'm saying there's about 160 scientists. There's about 320 publications a year, which is respectable. And the blue here is the percentage of all scientific publications coming out of Armenia. So that's physics, biology, chemistry, math. So 37% is from this lab. And if you look at the citations, it's 73% of all citations of scientific papers in Armenia are published by members of this lab. Not bad. It is definitely the best science lab in Armenia. But it is not competitive, world-class in all the areas that we would like it to be. And that's the measure today, right? So at MIT, wherever you are, you're always judging yourself. Are you the best there is in the world? Okay. So Alikhanyan, if it had in the past 3,000 people or 4,000 people working, there are a large part of the property. This is Hrastan. Many of you have been to Yerevan. It's a large campus right at the mouth of the river and basically a little bit on altitude. There are several campuses for the laboratory. There's a campus on Mount Aragat, which is 3,200 meter altitude. In Noramber, that's at 2,000 meter altitude. And there is an underground salt mine. When I mentioned this two neutrino double beta decay, that was detected in this salt mine in Yerevan. It's right in the center of the city, and it's you can go underground. It's a salt mine. It's absolutely wonderful in terms of radiation. So in the one sense, Armenians are measuring cosmic rays, and the other sense, you're hiding from cosmic rays to avoid the background. So that's what's going on in these places. What are the challenges? I don't have to tell any of you probably that there are challenges, but there are also opportunities. So the challenges are with human resources. There was large emigration from Armenia. Basically, Armenia was one of the best funded science republics in the Soviet Union. We can speculate what the reasons were for that. Armenians were very richly rewarded with instrumentation, money, jobs, so on. But after Armenia's independence, a lot of that, all those resources dried up. So Armenia was then dependent on its international relations in terms of surviving for science projects. And so when people left, anybody who could, did, basically. That left an age distribution that was not sustainable for a science lab. So we have very young people, and we have very old people. We have no one in between. Financial resources. So the challenge is for scientists to make attractive living wages. Even though Alikhanyan is the best science laboratory in Armenia, you still can't pay those people more. So they have to live at the same wages. They believe in this equality level and so on. So, and also if you don't have state-of-the-art instruments, you can't do state-of-the-art research. I'm at a university laboratory. We have to be very creative about doing the only or the best science, but you're limited by how good your instruments are. And then also the real estate. There's a lot of buildings. There's something like 70 buildings. Most of them are empty. But I view this both as a challenge and an opportunity. And I'll share a bit with you what I think the opportunities are. So this question of what happens to this laboratory that's famous, that's had an incredible past, fantastic scientific achievements. How do you go from 3,000 people to 300 and still do something reasonable, still do good science? So in 2009, Yuri Oganessian, who is a nuclear physicist who works in Dubna, he's at the Flerov Institute for Nuclear Reactions. He was born in Yerevan and actually taken to Moscow for being one of the best and the brightest when he was 18. He was a protege of Flerov, and he's the only living member who has an element named after him, Oganessian, element 118, and this is the stamp that Armenia issued this year. So Oganessian was called in to chair this committee, and he formed a committee of international experts. So there were scientists on this team from the UK, from Switzerland, from Germany, from Italy, from the US, and he also called me. I was the US representative. So I went on this committee representing the US to give advice to what should happen in this lab. Okay? So what should happen? The best of our advice at that time was to say, okay, so for a country like Armenia, small country, 3 million people, limited resources, you can't compete with CERN by building another LHC accelerator like they do in Geneva. But you have an economy that has in the past been very science and technology dependent. Armenia was the computer IT center for the Soviet Union. I said, why don't you try to emphasize applications? So in Alikhanyan, they had done nuclear science in the past, lower energy, but then they had moved on to medium energy and then to high energy. So, so why don't you do research that's good, that's competing worldwide, international level, but think about applications. And specifically about applications in nuclear medicine. Nuclear medicine does not exist in Armenia. Probably all of you know better than I do that in terms of cancers, everywhere in the world, cancers are going up. Everywhere. But the only thing is that the deaths from cancer are going down everywhere except in Armenia. Okay? So what's the reason for that? There could be many. But one of them is that nuclear medicine doesn't exist in Armenia. So the ones who have money, who are wealthy, they can travel to neighboring countries, get treatment, go to Europe and so on. But it doesn't exist in Armenia. This was the recommendation of this International Committee of Experts, which we delivered in 2011. And we said, okay, this laboratory is known as the Yerevan Physics Institute. It's kind of a big place for just physics. Why not make this the National Laboratory of Armenia, where people can come there with issues that they have, whether it's issue in agriculture, can be issue in energy, can be issue in detectors or electronics, and solve those problems in this lab. You have the expertise. Why not? So that was the suggestion of this committee. And Yuri Oganessian was very effective in convincing the government of Armenia about the importance of investing in this laboratory. So besides changing the name from Yerevan Physics Institute to become the National Laboratory of Armenia, they invested. So the government in 2011 said, we agree with this committee, science is important. And actually, given that Armenia is landlocked, technology or application of science to do this sort of high-level economy is very important for Armenia. So if you try to do some low-energy nuclear science, which has lots of applications, whether it's development of electronics or testing electronics for faults or an IT community, why not to capitalize on the application side? So 2012, Armenia spent a lot of money and they bought a new cyclotron from IBA, this company in Belgium, which is very famous for these cyclotrons. And they said, okay, so now Armenia's going to, they spent the money. Now we're going to put it together and make isotopes, radioactive isotopes. So basically the introduction of nuclear medicine in Armenia. You can use those isotopes for diagnosis as well as treatment. So that was the idea. Pretty simple. You buy the machine, you put it together, you turn it on. Well, they bought the machine, they put it together, and they have not yet turned it on. So I just want to highlight this on this list here of what was done in this laboratory before and what's my input to say what we want to do for the future. So I said create new areas of research, make Alikhanyan into a technology corridor. You have all this real estate. It's an incredibly good location. When I agreed to take the job, I said to the government, you have to promise not to sell any of this real estate. And pretty much what I had to do the minute I took the job was sell a piece of the real estate. I could tell you about that if you want to know later. And then to introduce low-energy nuclear science. So that's what I do. I'm a low-energy nuclear experimentalist. Low energy means that I put in just enough energy to maintain nuclei when you do nuclear reactions. I don't tear it apart like you do at the LHC. You don't separate out the quarks. You still have a nucleus. So you do a nuclear reaction, but you still study the nucleus. Low energy nuclear science has lots of applications. I also thought we could do new things like introduce robotics and new materials, do biotech and so on. But the important idea was we have all this real estate, we have all these buildings, neglected for over 50 years. Now imagine what happens to your house when you're gone for a month. Now multiply that by all those months and all those years. So we've started renovations. So my idea is that to renovate one building at a time and then invite tech companies to come and rent there. So I think most of you speak Armenian. So when you have 3,000 people, you have a joch environment compared to 300 people. I thought the combination of having the IT companies there, or I'm just saying IT, but sort of invite multiple tech companies in. At the moment, I have 5 IT companies that want to come in. So we're renovating one building and going to rent it to them, and then basically take those resources and renovate other parts, other buildings, and buy equipment. I feel, yes, the government could give us more money, and Oganessian has convinced the government to double the money of the lab. But still, I mean, the average physicist, scientist at this lab makes $200 a month. And if any of you have visited Yerevan in the near past, that's not enough to keep a family. It's not enough to rent. One of my nieces just came back from Armenia after having lived there for a year and a half. She had decided to move to Armenia, so she was looking for jobs. The best jobs she were offered were paying like $400 a month, and she couldn't afford it because she had to pay rent and to live. So most of the scientists are getting $200 a month. Okay, it's not just money, but people have to live. Many people are doing 2 jobs, sometimes 3 jobs. So what I said is I'm going to make it possible for the young people to be able to make a living with 1 job working as a scientist. So, and also sort of groom them for leadership. And I would like to invite you as well. So I'm trying to develop a network of expatriate scientists who've left to come back and provide the place to basically to come to Armenia maybe for a month, provide you a place, provide you the students to talk to, so we can benefit from all the knowledge that's out there. We have such incredible resources. I'm very fond of saying we're a small country, but we're a big nation. We're all over the planet and such skilled people as the audience shows here. Okay. I'm just going to mention quickly the linear accelerator. They recently upgraded the energy to 70 MeV. And what you can do there is possibly produce neutrons. I've talked to some German scientists who are willing to come and consult with us to do that, or to do photoexcitation reactions to study different things. Very old machine. It would be best if you bought a new one, but you have to start somewhere. I think we use what we have. And also the cyclotron. It doesn't just have to be used for isotope production. It's a proton beam. It's 18 MeV. You can use the protons to make neutrons via reactions, or do proton-induced reactions to study stellar evolution. Right, so that's my area, stellar evolution. These are some pictures from the electron linear accelerator pictures. The cyclotron, it's in a very new, shiny building compared to some of the older buildings. Actually, the architecture is beautiful in these buildings. I think with the renovations, they're going to look amazing. So here's the cyclotron, and there's also machines for scanning, a beamline to do experiments with the proton beam and then to do scanning. Everything is ready. What was short about starting the cyclotron was the delivery of radioactive isotopes to test the machine, and the gases, pure quality gases in Armenia in order to test the machine. So the company that the government of Armenia bought it from has to certify that they have delivered what was ordered. And the only way you can test that is if you have that high quality stuff. So that's why I am in Armenia. I had gone there on vacation the summer of 2017 with relatives from Syria and Lebanon and the US. We had a great vacation. At the end of 3 weeks, the last day, I said, I'm going to go see what's going on at the lab. I go there, the cyclotron's not running. I tried to find out why it's not running. I discovered it. I went to the chairman of the board of trustees and I said, Amot Sezi, like, you're not getting this thing running. And I said, if the government of Armenia would give me the power of attorney, I'll make this run by the end of the year. And I didn't mean that I would take the job. I just meant that I would make it run. But the way it turned out, I got the job. And in July 2011, I got the power of attorney for 1 year. And I had scheduled some initial commissioning tests in September. The visits occurred from the companies, but the commissioning did not occur. So I'm already behind schedule, but I hope I can keep my word. I intend to anyways. So the idea here is that you use the cyclotron to produce isotopes and then do the imaging part, and then you can sell this part as a business. But you can still use a part of it. Most cyclotrons around the world that produce isotopes, they don't run all day, 24 hours. They run maybe 4 hours, depending on how much product you're supposed to produce, and then they turn it off. So I thought 4 hours of isotope production, 20 hours of physics, you can do a lot of things. So this is the plan. The plan about studying nuclear science, I mentioned some, and gave some examples of how you can do it. So this is a university laboratory in Jyväskylä. It's a center of excellence in Finland. So they use a cyclotron to produce a proton beam, and then they do fission studies. So proton beam on uranium, you have fission products. There's a lot of science you can do studying those things. Here's another example. This is with University of Frankfurt. You can use a proton beam and then make neutrons. And neutrons are very useful for studying materials. So a very applied sort of side of the work. Armenia is a nuclear country in terms of energy, strongly dependent on nuclear energy, and pretty much no program in low energy nuclear science. There's people who do it, people who've done it in the past, but right now with students with equipment, detectors, and so on. But there's a lot we can do. There's a lot we can do with medical stuff. So produce the isotopes, teach people how to use them, medical physics, and materials. So this is a report produced by the European Union for nuclear physics. I always use it to highlight the fact that there's a lot of applications that could be useful. I'm going on too much, so I'll make it fast. So materials, you can irradiate materials, make them harder. You can make them for space applications, for all kinds of things. Alikhanyan had a strong program in radiobiology while it was Yerevan Physics Institute, and that department has shrunk quite a bit, but I think it's unique. There's not too many radiobiology programs in the world. Okay, lots of new ideas. You can study stellar evolution. So this is made from a colleague at my university at Notre Dame. This is what the Notre Dame Nuclear Science Laboratory is known for. We're known in the world for doing research in nuclear astrophysics. So we can bring the team to collaborate with Armenia to start a research program in nuclear astrophysics. I feel that this is an area that we can compete with the entire world with. You can be world class in nuclear astrophysics with the machines that we have. Okay, I'll go fast. So nuclear physics is basically looking at the micro reactions that determine what happened in the bigger universe, in the cosmos. So microcosmos that drives the macrocosmos. Stars, whether stars live or die, depend on those very simple nuclear reactions of proton burning and alpha burning. So just to do the science of burning is really what can get us there. So this is just some, in red are what's possible to study. This figure is sort of the lifeline of stars. It's a temperature and density plot. So how long a specific star stays on this line or falls out of it depends on the nuclear reactions that take place there. So this is, there is already actually a cosmology and astrophysics group in Alikhanyan. So if they're more theoretical, so if we group that with the experimental, they could be a powerful force in nature. Okay, some of the connections worldwide. This is China, Russia, the US, and so on. So connections all over the world from the small laboratory, but even bigger connections are possible. This is the age distribution of the scientists in Alikhanyan. This is under 35. The different colors are different divisions. So you basically have this little empty sort of parabola. So the 36 to 40, 45, sort of this is the age that you normally get the leaders from. This is very low. You can see it's under 5. And there's people who are working in the lab that are over 85.
Is that one person on the very right?
Yes. You know who that is, I think.
My aunt?
So, several very dedicated, passionate scientists, over 70, that are willing to teach and willing to be there, and they've been there to teach the young ones. But the people in between have gone. So those are the people I want to get back. This is the gender distribution. The blue is the women and the different divisions. The red are the guys. So this is 80% here. So I had made a case with the government that if you want to keep the best and the brightest, you have to be able to reward excellence and pay people enough money. But I said I would also work on bringing expatriate scientists to come to Armenia to teach, to get engaged, and to collaborate. The last thing is that I think there needs to be a state-of-the-art visitor building that people can come and stay. I've actually been, as director, been given the cottage of Alikhanyan to live in. It's old, but it's really nice. I like it. So, Armenia has lots of vibrant young people. Those of you that have visited Armenia, all you have to do is go walk around in the streets, and I do that a lot, and it's really puts a smile on my face. We're doing well. So I thought, okay, we have all these great young people. Let's train them. Let's work. So the first things I've done is build a strategy team for scientists under 35. These are the people. So they're in applied physics, in the theoretical division, experimental, and so on, cosmic ray physics. Basically 1 or 2 from each division. And I meet with them every week. I don't do it in person. Well, I do it in person, but on Zoom or Skype. I'm trying to teach them to be leaders and take responsibility and do things and really be engaged in all the decisions that have been done. It's not usual in Armenia that the director asks the opinion of the young people. The young people are used to being told, this is the way it's going to be, you're going to do it this way. So that is very new. And we are together writing a proposal to the EU. EU Commission this year has invited Armenia to join. Armenia is not a member of the EU, but we've been invited to join. So we're writing a proposal, which is actually due next week, which is exactly what I'm going to do tomorrow evening after I finish my talk here, go back to writing the proposal. So we're working together with this young team of strategy group members. the proposal is to bring up to 5 Western-style scientists to Armenia. The idea is to bring one person who's mid-career successful to be the chair of the operation, and then that person can hire 4 to 5 younger people. Here, their salaries will be like they were working in the USA. So starting assistant professor in the USA is now making $80,000 a year. Okay, it's a little different than what the scientists in Armenia are making. So there's a lot of worry in the lab that this is going to cause jealousy and cause discomfort, whatever. My belief is there's nothing that works like success. So you just, I think it will float the boat of everyone. So if we can get someone who's willing to come to Armenia to start finding the group, the rest of us will help that person fill the group. They get paid for 5 years in Western salaries. There's money for conferences. There's money for bringing in experts. So I approached the science committee of the state to see if they would do something called startups. In the US, when you get a faculty job, you negotiate for a startup. You say, okay, I need $1 million to buy equipment. And the science committee said they would not do that. But I said, me as director, I will do that. Not $1 million, no. But I will do a startup package for the people that we make offers to, for money from the lab. And I am counting on the fact that we're going to all succeed because of that. So if you have one successful group who does well, then they can compete for funds, and then eventually we can do that for everybody. It's going to be competition. It's not, we can't get away from that. Okay, so we had this conference that was to bring in experts, and Aprahamian was there. And we can do more of these. The one aspect that has totally blown me away since I took this job is that people who know me from around the world picking up the phone, calling me up and saying, what can we do to help you on? Arek did that, I didn't know him. He's Armenian, but lots of non-Armenians did the same. People call me from Sweden, from the UK, from Germany. They said, what can we do to help you on? So I couldn't believe it. So, okay, the conference had a lot of interesting topics. What I want to say is we concentrated on applications this one last day. This was a big conference on hadronic matter. There were a lot of people there. Everyone loved Yerevan. And then we had the welcome was done by both ministers. Usually in Armenia, you have to go begging people, please come, talk to me. But in this case, the 2 ministers wanted to come and welcome the same group of people on the same day. So we had to figure out how to do that. So the Minister of Economy and the Minister of Science and Education, they both came to welcome the group. And then that evening we had a reception in the Cyclotron hall to show people that not everything is old. We have all these posters, we had science, and there were lots of people there too. Okay. So this is 2018. It's 75 years after the founding of the Yerevan Physics Institute. So it was the 75th anniversary. So we did a big hands-on outreach event following that conference on September 29. It was pretty amazing. I'll just show you pictures. People came from the UK, from Germany, and from the US to help with this outreach event. And there was a big Armenian team of young scientists to help the kids do some hands-on experiments in the lab courtyard. So Alikhanyan opened its doors, and that's how we celebrated the 75th anniversary. This is Alison Bruce, is a Dean of Sciences at University of Surrey in the UK. She and I were office mates when we were graduate students. This is the Minister of Science and Education. He was really impressed with what the kids were doing. And this is Peter Ivanov. He's Russian but works in the UK. He was a student of Yuri Oganessian, I guess, but he really was thrilled to come to Armenia, and various other professors from the UK. The UK embassy called us and said, can we do the reception? Usually you have to go ask people, right? In the end, we said, well, we're serving alcohol, so we can't do that. So they paid for all the posters to be printed, and so they sponsored this reception. They were another group who said, how can we help you? Let us help you. We stopped counting at 500. There were more than 500 kids that came that day. This is our colleagues from Notre Dame. This is Rosa. She's from Armenia. She had come to Notre Dame to do her experiments with us, and this is our outreach person at Notre Dame. This is my colleague, director of the nuclear lab at Notre Dame. Lots of kids and excitement. That's what was fun to see. Seeing those smiling faces, I have to say, has lasted me for over a month. There's lots of pictures everywhere. So here they're making ice cream with liquid nitrogen. The kids were into that. They all wanted this colorful ice cream. This is the Radik Mardirosyan, is the Science Academy chief in Armenia. So even he came and he had some things to learn. So you see, anyways. This is the entrance hall to this building 22. It's been renovated and looks beautiful, and we put up a logo. You see somebody didn't put a Siranush, not like you, they didn't pay attention to this thing. And I'm coming almost to the end. This is me trying to enter the office of the director. It was amazingly well secured. It's 2 doors. It's a steel door, and then you go inside and there's a wooden door. I spent quite a bit of effort to try and get in the door. I didn't know how to operate those keys, I guess. This is the director's office. It's a huge place. I kept saying, you know, I don't need all this space. So a colleague of mine took a picture of this space and compared it to my office at Notre Dame, which is a tiny little cubbyhole. And he showed this picture to the dean and said, what do you expect? You know, no wonder she wants to go to Armenia. This is what she has compared to this. Anyways, and then there was this door in the director's, and I didn't know what this door was for, so I really tried to work hard to open the door. It turns out that was the spot that the KGB person sat in during the Soviet times to listen to the discussions that the director had with whoever was in his office. And I'm saying his because it was his office. So, and I was told that there was also a phone here where you could call Moscow if you wanted to. An urgency. So I'm not expecting to make use of this office, but I'll end my talk with here saying that there are many challenges and opportunities at Alikhanyan National Laboratory of Armenia. There's huge support of the government because they do believe that supporting science will help the economy. And the media have been super wonderful. There are all these young people that just show up for any science things, and they're wonderful. They arranged some press conference for me when my last trip. The reporters are usually all young women. They look like they haven't yet graduated from high school, but they have. They're all young. So There's a lot of support outside of Armenia, so for obviously our incredible Armenian diaspora, right? Just amazing, what can I say? You're missing the words to say all what diasporan Armenians have done for Armenia. And then the EU Commission, it's a question mark. I put this comment here from Hagop Panosian. He finds some small technology proposals here and there, and I do some reviewing for him. I hadn't seen this comment. Science and technology in Armenia needs to be first rate. Well, I can't agree more. So this is Boston, and I gotta say it. It always moves me to come into the Boston airport because there are all those posters that say the Kennedy quote on going to the moon. It says, we choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things not because they're easy, but because they are hard. I think this fits our situation in Armenia. I chose to go to Armenia to do this job, not because it's easy, but because it's hard. So, I don't want to compare myself to that, but thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ani. We are very glad to have you today, and we would like to continue the conversation with Farhan Arek Danagulian. Farhan Arek is an assistant professor of nuclear science and engineering here at MIT. He has background in experimental nuclear physics and is doing research in applied nuclear physics. After discussion, we will open the question and answers for you. Thank you very much.
You want us to come up?
Yeah, we're going to sit here.
No, I'll leave it to the scientists.
Hello everyone, thank you very much for coming. Thank you for braving the bad weather. You know, I was coming here, I was wondering how many people are going to come to this torrent. I love seeing so many people over here. So essentially what we're going to do is we're going to talk about a couple of topics relevant to the question of science and education in Armenia, and I'll ask fairly extended questions, and Ani will have a chance to address them. And afterwards, I'll focus on 3 questions because we have a limited amount of time, even though this is something that we probably could discuss for days at a time, right? And then afterwards, we'll have a question and answer where you can ask questions and you can also give some answers, okay? Like the questions that we ask, I'm going to try to keep them fairly open-ended, all right? And I try to talk about things that specifically perhaps we have not talked much about. Okay, like all of us worry about the situation of science and education in Armenia. A lot has been said about the fact that we do not have oil, but we have brains. Okay, and and essentially that's our hope. Okay, when it comes to the various problems that Armenia faces, that's our hope. That's our main resource, as you pointed out during your talk. During Soviet times, that was the main thing that Armenia was contributing towards the Soviet economy and Soviet society. So 3 questions I want to talk about is precisely, when we talk about the various problems about science and education, we talk a lot about resources, right? Hardware, funding, salaries, right? And essentially, of course, you cannot do science without those things. But those things are necessary but insufficient condition to achieve good scientific output, to achieve good scientific progress. There are, however, problems that you cannot solve by throwing money at them. Okay? So questions about specific education, something that worries me quite a bit, I have to say, when I talk to people in Armenia, to many of the scientists in Armenia, or people who work in technology in general, there's a real worry about the quality of the education, where it stands. There was a significant drop in the 90s, which was understandable. There was a Tsurtumut Tarinet, the cold and dark years. But now Armenian economy is not so bad. There's really no excuses for things to go bad again. And there's a variety of reasons have been proposed. One of the worries is that the actual teaching, the quality of teaching is not the same as before. So again, I want to acknowledge that many people have done, have organized many efforts to help the situation of science in Armenia. The FAST Foundation, the Armenian National Science Education Fund, led by our friend Ashok Papoyan, is over there, which helps solve many of these problems. The next question I want to ask is still, how is the science teaching done? Okay, and are there significant problems there or not? Okay, so a couple of things that just to give some background, I did not go to university in Armenia, but I finished effectively the high school in Armenia. Okay? And I remember how education was done, and I'm an educator now, so I can do comparisons. And we're here at MIT, so we're going to give a critical look to those things, okay, how that is being done. One of the things that stands out when I remember how education was done, and many people have graduated recently, like Siranush is here, hopefully she can say something. My memories is that, for example, pedagogy was essentially non-existent in the way the teaching was done. Teachers use many different methods that are fairly anti-pedagogical. The other problems that do come to mind is the fact that, for example, in Yerevan State University, most of the faculty are fairly old. There aren't as many young faculty, sort of show this plot with this gap in the middle, right? There are other problems too that we don't discuss much. Okay, so here at MIT, one of the criteria that we consider as part of the quality of education is the institution's ability to bring people from uneducated families. Uneducated not necessarily in the derogatory term, in terms of, for example, for rural places, the first generation students who in their families are first time going to university. Okay? That is seen as a really positive thing. I personally have students who come from very poor background. Their parents did not even have high school education. And here they are graduating from MIT, okay, and contributing to, and really going back to their communities, helping over there. When I remember how education was typically done in Armenia, teachers primarily focused on kids from educated families. And most of my friends who graduated from universities and got education, myself included, most of them already came from educated families. Okay. This means that effectively if you come from a kind of, from a peasant, rural, working class background, your chances of making it into sciences are fairly slim in Armenian society. And this is quite problematic because it immediately limits the number of people who are going to participate in the effort to a fairly small group. You really want to involve the whole society. So in this context, I'm extremely glad that at the Institute that had this open house, and so many children showed up from the villages, particularly brought lots of kids from the border villages. That's a fantastic thing that I hope something like that will be done. And somewhat related also to the question as how teaching is being done, some of the, obviously one of the things that concerns a lot is the amount of the discrimination towards women in the sciences. I'm very glad to see that 20% of the Physics Institute are women. That's actually more than in our department. In our department, it's maybe 15% here. Right. And yet, when you talk to, I talk to many women who are in sciences or technology in general, they talk about like overt discrimination. Overt as in like normal. Well, of course you shouldn't be there. You should be worrying about children and your family. He, on the other hand, he has to take care of his family, which is why we promote him and we don't promote you. I've literally heard stories like this a lot. Right? How do we break this kind of this approach that is ultimately quite limiting to how science is going to develop?
Well, let me address the opportunity question first. I think the new government of Armenia is really making an effort. The Minister of Science and Education, when he heard we were going to do this outreach, he actually paid for buses to bring the kids from the villages to the lab, to Yerevan. He provided actually overnight housing for them and lunch, so the kids could come and participate. So I think the new government has the intention for that. For the overt discrimination, it's quite shocking because Armenian women are amazingly strong, right? Right?
They can be. They can be.
I mean, my experience is that the Armenian guys don't look you in the eye. The women will just stand up to you and say, I don't think you should do it that way. So I don't quite understand the whole thing. So my strategy team has 25% women, as you saw. And they really speak up. They're the only ones who speak up and tell me that they disagree with me. guys all go along with, okay, whatever you say, and they're the only ones who say, no, I think you're wrong, or,
Could it be that they're feeling embarrassed because you are a woman and that sort of empowers them?
I don't know, because this proposal we're writing, we sent the first drafts to the team, and the first person who responded was one of the women in the team, and she said, I think you're confused. This is my proposal, what do you mean I am confused? So, and I think you're right, the education system, I mean, when students from Armenia, they're strong in the theoretical aspects, they're not so strong and hands-on. So I've had students from Armenia over the last 5 years to come and work in our lab. They kind of make fun of the American students who don't know enough physics theoretically, but they really don't know how to do any of the stuff with detectors or electronics, so they have to learn.
So you say the Armenians, they understand the theory fairly well, but don't have any kind of,
Hands-on experience, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Even the simplest electronics or detectors, signal processing, they're incredible simulating things. But I think you're right that the professors are quite old. So I'm hoping that if we are successful with this proposal, and chances of success are very low, but if we are successful, that they will also teach in the university. So I have talked to the universities and asked them to come to the lab. So Yerevan State University, actually, there's some nuclear experimentalists there, women. And they were very interested in coming and collaborating. So I said we could do both. We could provide opportunities for them to come do experiments, and we can have people from the lab go to the university and teach classes. And also lots of visitors from outside.
Somewhat related to this whole process of intermixing between research and education. In the United States, it's almost, if not all research universities at least, you're required to mix education and research. People who educate are researchers themselves, and most of researchers, if not all, do some kind of education. The idea is that in order to teach physics or mathematics or biology or history, even humanities, you have to do the research yourself too. Not always the case, but most research universities have that. In Soviet Union, Soviet times, most of the time the two things were split.
Yes.
There were universities where little research was being done, and there were institutes where little education was being done. And if we're lucky, some people from institutes would go on, would also teach, and and let's say my father's generation, they used to tell that their best teachers were the ones who were also doing research. Like they would really stand out. They were like really interesting. And my impression right now is there's very few people, for some Yerevan State universities, actually are involved in research. And so I guess the hope is to kind of break this barrier between research and education and get people to.
That's right. I mean, if you go to conferences anywhere around the world, if you have somebody giving a talk on their science, if they're teaching, you can tell a difference. You can really understand what they're saying. You can follow it very logically. But if they come from one of the labs, they're much less accessible. So I'm hoping we develop this culture in Armenia. So I've talked to the Polytechnic people, I've talked to the Yerevan State University. I haven't talked to the Russian university, but definitely want to bring everybody in and bring some of our people out to them to teach the areas of expertise that are lacking. I mean, if you haven't been teaching or if you haven't been doing experiments for 20 years, things have changed, right?
Do you have involvement with American University also?
American University, I approached about starting a program in nuclear medicine or medical physics. An American degree in the US, most of the students who come to study medical physics, they pay money, a lot of money to come. They come from other countries. It's a 2-year program. And I approached American University about that. They don't have science, so they're trying not to compete with Yerevan State University. They're more business and...
I guess that was their original mission, to bring things that Armenia doesn't have.
Yeah.
Right.
But I think they're the people that could start a master's of medical physics or something. Then the university people and the lab people can teach some of the science courses which are needed. And the students can come to Alikhanyan and use the detectors to do the practice stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm still convincing
That's it.
on that. I have not yet succeeded on that.
So a question related again to education. I want to talk a little bit about the Luce Foundation or the model of Luce Foundation. Luce Foundation has essentially been discontinued. But just to give some background to people, this was essentially a program that was started by the previous government about 8 years ago, 9 years ago. The idea was to fund halfway a number of 10 students, I believe, a year from Armenia to travel to what the government chose as top 10 universities in the world and study there, both undergraduate level as well as graduate level. A number of the alumni or students from that are in this room. Siranush came here through the Luce Foundation. So, you know, Armenia has institutions, educational institutions, Yerevan State University, AUA, things like that, and it's important to maintain them. However, you know, let's be frank, right? I don't mean to sound elitist. Armenia does not have Stanford. Armenia does not have Caltech. Armenia does not have MIT. Armenia doesn't even have Harvard, you know, for crying out loud. So those institutions, many of whom have fairly kind of, how should I say, not inclusive, but inviting policy towards foreign students. For example, MIT has need-free admission. You know, if you get admitted to MIT based on your merits, they'll figure out the money for you. You know, if you can get half the money, they'll bring in half the money. Harvard has that, Princeton, I believe, has that, Stanford has that. That's a fantastic resource that Armenians could use to have really cutting-edge, modern type of, really advanced type of an education. The problem with this kind of, and by the way, Armenia is by no means the only country that does this. There are many other countries have similar programs that encourage their students to go and study in the United States or in Europe. And Turkey, for example, is by the thousands. Every year people come and study over here. But here's the thing. Most of those Turks who come study over here, then they go back to Turkey and they do their research, they contribute to the science, they contribute towards education. It's not clear how much of that is happening with the Armenians. Okay, I've heard different numbers. If you ask the Luce Foundation, they'll claim 65% come back. If you ask people kind of, you know, anecdotally, they'll say maybe 15% come back, depending how they count. So there's on one hand, there's this incredible gift that you can get, the country can get by sending their students to some of these institutions. The downside is brain drain, right? They'll come over here. Why should they come back to Armenia? There's like such good conditions to work over here. It does not mean that some of them don't go back. They have, many people have family. They're willing to give up some of the kind of benefits here and still go back. But it does not happen as often as you like to happen. Is there something different that we can do, similar type of a program, where instead of brain drain, we have a term that was used, is brain circulation, where people come here, maybe they stay a long time, but ultimately they go back. Or, you know, there's some kind of a feedback back to Armenia. And so I'm curious to hear what you, I know you have opinions about this, and this is an opportunity to share and
Yeah, I mean,
influence our thinking.
the Luce Fellows, they get a lot of money to go out. It's something like $50,000 a year. And I think there's a lot you can do with that kind of money in Armenia. I think you do have to send people out if you have to go and start fields that you don't have in Armenia.
Yeah.
So there's some things you don't have, and you want those people to come back. So the Chinese and I don't know the Japanese, but some of the Arab countries, they have very strict conditions. They'll send their people out with loads of money, but you have to come back. If you don't come back, then you have to pay the money, or there's some fine you have to pay. And I don't think the Luce Foundation has that. They just send the kids out. My feeling is the very good kids, like you say, MIT would love to have them anyhow. They would come up with the money anyhow.
Yeah.
So that has happened before Armenia became independent. That happened with Russia all the time. They just made deals with the students that were very bright and just took them.
Right.
to Russia and they worked in all the different labs. They didn't come back necessarily. So,
So if we compare it, for example, to the 60s, where many people went and studied in Russia, if we look at people who founded Yerevan Physics Institute, right, most of them were actually not high Nazi, right? Most of them were either Georgian Armenians, Russian Armenians, or at the very least they got their education in Russia,
yeah.
not in Armenia, right? But there were some serious incentives for them to come back. Not more than just the desire to be in their homeland, to connect with their culture and things like that. I mean, so it didn't really build up an institute. Like tell them, here, do physics. Right? Maybe we cannot build up an institute, but is there some other things? Is there some intermediate kind of solutions, or maybe we could modify the way this foundation works, where maybe some money is given towards students going studying there, some amount of money is maybe used to create. You talked about startup funds and things like that, perhaps used towards that. So incentivize them for them to come back, which is not part of, because it was not part of use at all, right?
Yes.
Or perhaps, for example, also incentivize Armenian students from diaspora to come and study at American University of Armenia, right? And as such, create this brain circulation. Yeah.
For people to go study at American University of Armenia in Yerevan. I don't know what tuition is, like $2,000.
Yeah. And so
You
US
can't go
accredited.
to an American university in the US for that kind of money
Yeah, yeah.
anywhere anymore.
And it's a US accredited institution.
Yes,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
a US degree, so
That's right. That's right.
it's a really good deal.
So interestingly, when I was talking with Armen Tergyohan, this is a bit of a digression, he said that now AUA is also accredited in Turkey. So as such, AUA is the only university accredited in Turkey that teaches about Armenian genocide as part of their yeah.
Are they accredited by University of California?
Yes, yes.
Oh, I don't know.
Well, they're part of the University of California.
AUA in
Yeah,
Armenia,
yeah.
in
If
Armenia
I'm not
is, but I
mistaken.
didn't know about AUA in Turkey.
No,
American
there is no
University
AUA in Turkey.
AU in Turkey.
There is no American university. I believe Boğaziçi used to be.
It used to be. There's no American university as such in Turkey.
Yeah. So the AUA is the only one in Turkey. Let's see, something else that we wanted, something I wanted to talk about a little bit also is finally, we talked a lot about the resources, like, potential, neruj, these things, and we talk about the impact that diaspora can have on Armenia. Like we talk about a lot, right? Like what can diaspora do for Armenia? Right? And specifically, what can they do in this when it comes to this question? So in the United States, this is like I'm making a very general statement right here. The United States government, the way it runs, okay, it funds or at least involves a whole army of think tanks where there's experts studying a variety of questions, okay, everything from economy, defense, science, technology, climate, various kind of doing policy relevant analysis. It has all kinds of organizations which are filled with, let's say, academics, which give the U.S. government essential advice on how to run things. Organizations like MIT have visiting committees that every 2 years, typically made up of alumni, come to that university, and the MIT asks them. I'm using this not for MIT. Many big organizations in the United States do this. Where the typical question is that, what could we do better? Okay, great, we're good, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but that's not good enough. Want to be even better. Okay. Now that you have left MIT, or now you're looking at MIT from outside, what are the obvious flaws that you think we should fix? My general impression is very little of that happens,
Zero happens with that. And this International Experts Committee recommendations, the recommendations were met with hostility to start.
Yeah.
Because they said, who are these people? They think they know better. What do they think they know?
Yeah.
And in Armenia, so the science committee, for example, sends things to be reviewed by your collaborators, which, it's conflict of interest. But how do you send out proposals written in Armenia? To whom do you send them to be reviewed? So it's it's a challenge in that sense.
One kind of observation that I have to make, right? This is not just happens at the governmental level, right? It also happens at, like one example that I like to give. I graduated from Yerevan Physics Mathematics School, like the elite physics mathematics high school. There's a number of us here. Ashot is from there. Yelena, his wife, was from there. Many of them graduated. We came here. So, and actually, you know, Fizmat, as we refer to it, has done a really great job, you know, producing good students. A number of them have graduated there, have come here. So you're not showing Michigan as an example. And they clearly are interested in getting students to come here. They're clearly interested in getting, you know, like really. So now, as like I sort of asked this question, but you know the answer. But like I've been here for 4 years, right? Guess how many times have they contacted me with questions? How does MIT work? Arek, you have studied here, you have seen how things work outside. Tell us, what should we change? How many times do you think they have contacted me?
None.
0.0 times, exactly, okay? And most of my kind of friends from FISMA that I talk to, most of them too have never heard anything. And there's this general, like, how do we change that? Like, this is, you know, how do we explain that diaspora is not just a resource, you know, for material, you know, like funding and things like that. Or diaspora can also bring what, let's, you know, very generally called expert advice, right? There are scientists outside of Armenia who are Armenians or in general are related to Armenia somehow. It could be diaspora Armenians, could be people who have studied there, have studied over here, can they can do apple-to-apple comparisons to some degree, right? Last month there was a talk by Hayarapetyan,
Yep. Professor Hayarapetyan from NASA Goddard.
From NASA Goddard Center.
Astrophysicist,
And
astrobiologist.
Yeah, astrobiologist gave a very interesting talk, and we talked about the same topic, and his idea was to create maybe a national research council in Armenia, where people like this could, at least within sciences, could give the government some kind of policy advice as to how to run scientific research, you know, how to run technological development.
Yeah.
So I mean, do you have any thoughts about this?
I've had a lot of thoughts about this because some of the issues in Armenia are policy issues which have to be changed.
Mm-hmm.
So for Alikhanyan, I have already thought about to have a standing committee of experts come from the outside. But there are some policy government level decisions which have to be changed in Armenia. So for them, who are they going to listen to?
Mm-hmm.
So people in Armenia have said to me, she's really not Armenian, she's American, she came here, she's telling us what to do. So we need somebody who's from Armenia, who's outside, who they respect. Like Oganessian was highly respected.
Mm-hmm.
So I call Yuri and I go, Yuri, we need to change this policy. He says, yes, you're right. Well, so you have to have the people that are listened to. The first time I went to give advice in Armenia, they made a caricature of me and they had me hanging Alikhanyan by his feet so in a newspaper, and I was like, I'm not hanging Alikhanyan by his feet, you know. So,
Do you feel,
you know, our people are resilient and they've made it through everything, and we're all independent, right? We don't like people telling us what to do.
well, there's 10 Armenians in the room, there's 11 opinions. Right? Yeah. So do you feel that the new government is perhaps in some ways different? Do you feel that they are more kind of nuanced about these things?
I don't know yet.
Okay.
I'm reserving judgment for that. For example, Prime Minister's office contacted me about the schedule of things for the cyclotron. I had a project timeline. I said, this is the project timeline I'm following. There are some challenges. If I don't get the stuff, I can't do it. So, I'm waiting to see. They have good intentions.
Fingers
They have
crossed.
really good intentions,
Yeah.
yes.